Happy New Year, everyone. This is Andrew Walquist at Local Hero Post with a little Scratch tutorial for you. You're looking at the explosions of a little Easter egg that Assimilate has put in here to remind me that I am not on vacation, but I am working just before the new year. And today we're going to talk about a couple new things in version 5.2 having to do with red R3D footage and changing your metadata. What I want to talk about is making sure that you start your project using the most neutral settings that you can so that you don't shoot yourself in the foot when you begin your color correct. You want to have a nice neutral starting point so you don't lose any information or add in any information in the metadata that you don't want. So let's take a look at some footage here. I brought in this material. It's red MX footage, shot anamorphic. I brought in all the R3D files and I conformed it to an EDL, and then I did a massive fit width so that all the 4K images would come down to our 2K frame size. And here is what we are looking at. Let me flip over to the red metadata panel, which can either be found in Matrix Effects Controls or Process Effects Controls. And there's a General tab and a Color tab. And this is the way that the red R3D raw footage is being interpreted before it is passed over to Scratch's color system. So essentially you want to make sure that these settings are set up so that Scratch can do the best job possible when it's its turn to do the color correcting. So here's what we have based on what the camera settings were. Red gamma is our gamma curve. Red color is our color space conversion. We're going to leave that alone. Our color temperature Kelvin was set at 5600 and our ISO was at 800. Those are generally the things that we are starting to look at when we're doing a metadata color correct pass. So my first things that I'm looking at, I don't like how bright it is, and I also don't like how orange it is. So before we do any actual color correction in Scratch, I want to change these settings. Let's look at the histogram. Here it is. We got a lot of crushed highlights right here. Now we don't want to have crushed highlights when we're going into Scratch. We want to crush the highlights ourselves if we want to, and not let the metadata do it, but let Scratch do it. So let's try to flatten this out a little bit. One of the first things we like to do over here is take down our gamma curve a bit. Red gamma is about a 2.6 curve, but we like this Rec 709 curve for now, until something better comes along, which is a 2.2 curve. It's a little bit flatter. You can see it brings my highlights down into a little bit more manageable, so they're not as crushed, and I have more room to change the curve the way that I want to when I get into my color correct. The other thing we can look at is the possibility of taking down the ISO if we want to get more highlight data back. Let's take a look at what 640 looks like. Yeah. We've got a little even more going on here in our whites. So if we want to get back more of that white detail, we could. So let's say that that's what some of the settings that we're interested in. Now, if I went over to the Scratch side, let's look at the matrix. I'm going to go to curves, and I started to grade with this image. You would start to see, okay, I want to set my curve. I want to kind of crush the blacks and get the highlights. You'd start to say, wow, this is very orange. So either you can battle that in the Scratch side, or you could try to start from a better position with your metadata. Let's go back to metadata here. I'm going to reset this first. Going back to metadata, Kelvin 5600. That's generally a setting for sunlight, because that would be the color of sunlight. So let's go to 3200, which is generally the color of indoor incandescent light. Now we are at a much more of a neutral white position, but it is a little bit dead. I'm not sure that this is exactly where I want to start from. I'm going to try 4000. Now that seems like a little bit warmer, a good place to start my color correct from. And just as a little test to see if I'm going to be happy with it later, I'm going to jump over to my curves again and start playing around and see if I like it. Let's see, if I brought some contrast in and started to try to play with the image, then yeah, I'm kind of interested in where this could take me. I'm not too upset about what it's doing to my faces. Alright, reset that. It's not an actual grade, that was just a little test. Let's go back to our metadata. Okay, so this is the metadata settings that I want to take throughout this scene, you know, in all my different shots. And in the past, you would have to kind of shot by shot go through all these and make your metadata corrections by hand. However, now we can go back to the construct and into the media browser, and you'll see all your shots here on a big list. And up here, an R3D tab. Here we see all of our metadata settings right here in a list that we can change en masse. In fact, here's the shot that I was just toying with right there. So let's say we wanted to take this whole scene, or perhaps even the whole film, and do a bunch of changes all at once. I don't know where this scene begins, but let's just kind of choose randomly 110 and kind of go down to where it probably changes, which is about here, and say these are all the shots I want to change. I would like to be my gamma curve to be Rec 709. That's just 2.2. It has nothing to do with whether you're grading for HD or grading for cinema. It's just a mathematical 2.2 curve. And I'm going to leave red color alone. I want my Kelvin to be 4000. And I'd like my ISO to be 640. Kind of keep things the same. Now you see it all changed yellow for those are my changes. It won't actually stick until you click Apply Changes. There we go. We made some changes. It's going to take a second here, and then if I go back into my timeline or my player and look at the shots around it, then everything is looking the way that I set it with my metadata. So now I'd be ready to start grading this scene. But let's say you're going through the rest of the film and you said, okay, let's do this stuff as well. There's some outdoor stuff and it's very blue. Let's look at our metadata settings. Once again, let's try Rec 709. Histogram looks like I have plenty of space. I'm not losing any highlights anywhere, so I'm not going to mess with the ISO. But I am going to mess with my color temperature and try 7000 just to warm it up. There we go. That's a little warmer. Now say I was happy with those settings, I could now go back to my construct and media browser and find all those shots. In fact, I'm pretty sure all those shots are the ones that have ISO of 1000. In order to find all my shots that have ISO 1000, I can click Filters here. Once you have that selected, select your 1000. Oh, there's all my shots that have ISO 1000. Now I can select all these, change to Rec 709 curve, leave my ISO alone, change my Kelvin to 7000, apply changes, and then I should be ready to go to grade on that scene as well. There we go. It set all those shots to the settings that I was interested in. So there you go. That's a metadata pass, setting things to a very neutral look so that when you go into Scratch and do your actual color grade, that you're starting from a good position and you don't have situations where you're losing shadows or losing highlights that you don't want to lose, and you don't have situations where you're gaining colors that you don't want to gain. So this is Andrew Walquist from Local Hero Post signing off. Have a great new year, and thanks for using Scratch.